So anytime we find ourselves in conflict with a person, any conflict really, but I'm just going to use the example of personal conflicts, I think it's very helpful to examine what's underneath the conflict because there's always more going on beneath the surface. And so I'm going to use as an example a woman who hired me to do some work for her. And I would notice that whenever I would get messages from her regarding my work, I perceived her tone and her attitude as being very confrontational, very hostile, to the point where I would even feel anxious to open my email because I would already be anticipating another hostile message from her. And so I would feel a great deal of anxiety and just this constant sense of heaviness. And I noticed this heaviness was with me like the entire time that I worked with her, which thankfully was not a very long period of time. But it was kind of, even when I was doing something else, there was kind of always this like underlying sense of unease there. And I've noticed the same sensation in other instances where I perceived that somebody was unhappy with me, that somebody was angry with me. And so what that brought up was a fear that what if there could be some truth in what this person was saying? And so what if there was some truth in the idea that I was not very good at the work that I did? That it meant it was actually, I was starting to actually question my abilities as a writer, which before I had been very confident about. So I started to question, maybe I'm not very good at this after all. Maybe I'm in the wrong line of work, which was absurd, because I had been doing this for years and I had never really had any other interactions like this around my writing. But these were just kind of some of the thoughts that were coming up. And she would make certain comments saying how disappointed she was in my work. And so that brought up a feeling of shame. And so then what shame I think implies is somehow the sense that I'm not a good person. Yeah, that I'm like a bad person, that I don't honor my commitments to others, maybe that I am lazy, or I'm just interested in the money and just do subpar work, which again is kind of ridiculous when I thought about it from a logical level, because I wasn't even making that much money from this assignment, and considering all the hours that I put into it and all the hours then correcting what she was saying that was wrong with my work, I was probably making less than the minimum wage. But these are just the different things that came up. And so then what I realized is that I thought of it almost as, okay, I've talked about before this idea that we are a universe unto ourselves. And yes, I do believe that we are one with the divine mind, and at the core of the divine mind is peace, love, harmony, perfection, and all of these other things, like the conflict, for instance, they're just appearances within the divine mind, but they're just temporary appearances. They're always changing, and so they're not really the truth. They're not really like the absolute truth of who we are, or even of this existence, this universe. And I don't just mean our personal universe, but the universe as we know it. It's not like the fundamental truth. But at the same time, we're all these individual points of consciousness, right? And we all have our different perceptions that govern our universe. And so each of us is kind of operating in our own little universe. It's like we're all kind of wearing our own virtual reality goggles. And so our goggles are going to inform our perception of our world. And so people are going to have their own individual perceptions. And just because one person has a perception doesn't mean that that's the truth, the absolute truth of reality, and like an objective truth. And when you think about it too, like even statements, right, like good and bad, they're just subjective. They're very much open to individual interpretation. And so yeah, so when you start to realize that it's all subjective, right? And I can kind of choose whether or not I'm going to allow her perceptions and her interpretations, or I don't even know, because I'm obviously not in her universe. I'm not inside her mind, so I can't even say for certainty whether or not these actually are her perceptions, right? But these were just some of the things that I was perceiving. And so am I going to allow these things, these distortions, to infringe upon my universe? And I hope this is clear. This is just an insight that I had today, so I'm kind of formulating it as I go along. But yes, it's like I see this message, and then I start to form all these meanings around this message. Like, oh, I'm a bad writer, I do bad work, I'm lazy, I'm a bad person, I should just quit, I'm not cut out for this line of work, right? All these interpretations were coming out of this one message. And it was like this whole universe of meaning packed into this one message. And I could then make the choice whether or not I wanted to continue to align with these different belief systems. And obviously they're not very empowering beliefs. And yeah, and then at the end of the day too, and so yeah, so I kind of think about it. Another way to look at it also is I still am into movies, but not to the degree I was when I was a film student. I was just very hardcore, into movies and the top 10 list and the Oscars, and just seeing the results, basically, kind of what they came up with. And then if the movie that I perceived as being the best movie, if that movie didn't win Best Picture or didn't get voted on the top 10 list by all the critics, all the top critics, then I would get very disgruntled and very even angry and emotional about it, which at a certain point, I just realized how absurd this was, because it's just an opinion and it's not the ultimate truth of reality. And so the next time that you find yourself in a conflict with a person, and especially if there's a lot of anxiety generated around that conflict, start digging deeper into it and recognizing that it's not really about this other person. It's not even really about your dynamic with this person, but at least the internal, any unpleasant thoughts and emotions that arise from this perceived conflict, it's all pointing to things that this is bringing up about you. And then you can choose whether or not to embody these truths, to take on these truths, and to continue absorbing them as your own. And same thing with anger too. I just thought of this also, if you're angry at somebody, and usually the thought behind that anger is something to the effect of, oh, well, they just said, again, I could use this as about that woman, even though I wasn't really feeling any anger towards her, but I could say, oh, well, she's made all these mean comments about me and about my writing, and so usually I would say kind of the core feeling behind anger, right, is how dare they? And it usually, and beneath it is a belief that this person hurt you in some way. And again, it just comes back to beliefs that you're hanging on to about yourself, right? Because if you truly believed that that you did good work, that you were a good person, and you believed it at the deepest level, then these person's words and actions wouldn't really carry any charge with you. And sure, you might have some words with that person, but that doesn't mean that you're going to continue to stew about it for hours and hours after your interaction with that person. And so the key message here is that it all points back to you. And there's no shame and no condemnation if you have been believing not so empowering things about yourself, because every now moment is a clean slate. And in every moment you can choose to believe something else, and you can choose to see love instead of whatever it is that you're seeing.